welcome back to the podcast. You are listening to Let It Out with me. I'm your host, Katie Dalebout. I've been doing this since 2013, and it's my favorite thing that I've ever done. I say that almost every week. If you're new, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so glad you found the podcast. And if you are not new, if you've been around for a while listening to these episodes, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. If you have a podcast that you want to start, let me know. I would love to help you. Email me. All the info will be in the show notes. I'm recording this from Arizona. I'm on vacation with my boyfriend, and I've never been here before. Thank you guys so much for your suggestions. I mentioned in the secret listener Facebook club that I was coming here to Sedona, and I got so many recommendations from you guys, so thank you. And if you're going on a trip, highly recommend writing in there that you're going, and you can get suggestions from cool people. That's what I did, and it was great. If you want to join the Facebook group, the link is in the show notes. We also have this Patreon page where we give away other content like special episodes that I don't put on the feed, and I'm doing a listener monthly discussion. We're talking about indecision this month, and we also are doing there'll be journaling prompts that I put on there, and then a monthly content club, I'm calling it, because sometimes we'll discuss books, sometimes we'll discuss movies or a TV show. I'm choosing something different every single month. This month is Practical Magic. I watched it for the first time after Lacey Phillips, last week's podcast guest, and if you haven't listened to that episode, highly recommend it. I've been getting so much great feedback on that episode. It was the first one of the new season, so thank you so much for everyone who shared that they were listening and told me what they thought. It means so much. And anyway, so Lacey recommended that movie, Practical Magic, that came out in the 90s with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman, and I loved it so much. We're talking about that for the month of April. So join the Patreon page. We have a suggested donation for coming into the Facebook group of $1 a month. That's $12 a year. If you can do that, great. If not, secret, we'll let you in anyway. But it'd be cool if you want to support the podcast so I can keep doing it and doing more of it. Okay, this week's episode is with Kimberly Johnson. I love her so much. I serendipitously met her when she was in New York this fall and saw her speak, and knew instantly that I wanted to both work with her and have her on the podcast. She lives in California. She has a practice in Encinitas and LA, and she's a sexological body worker, a birth doula, and she specializes in helping people heal emotionally, physically, relationally, spiritually, and I'm so glad I found her. When she was in New York this winter, I had a session with her, and it was one of the most life-changing things that I've ever done. I learned a lot about my body. I'm not someone who is very connected to my body. I'm working on it. I want to be better at that, but I didn't grow up really understanding my body or my sexuality or my vagina, and even knowing what was what and what was where. And this session really helped me to do that. She'll tell you exactly what she does in her sessions, but I'm really happy that I did something out of my comfort zone and I worked with Kimberly, and I hope that if it's something that you feel like would be beneficial to you, that you try it too, even if it's outside of your comfort zone. And definitely check out her book. I just, on the plane to Arizona, ordered 2 copies to 2 people in my life who are pregnant right now, and I'm so happy that I did. I think it's going to be a great gift for them. And if you know someone who recently had a baby or is having a baby, highly recommend her book, The Fourth Trimester. We talk about it a bit in this episode, as well as talking about intimacy and connection. We get into painful sex. We talk about the Me Too movement. We talk about connection, motherhood, and a lot more. I think you'll really like this episode. Let's get to it as quickly as possible. I'll talk to you at the end. Thank you so much for listening. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FreshBooks.com. You know FreshBooks. You love FreshBooks. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I use FreshBooks. I love it. It's the easy-to-use online cloud accounting software. You can personalize the colors, and you can even add your logo. It's great for sending invoices. It really makes you look buttoned up, and it's great for tax season. You can even set up FreshBooks to import expenses directly from your bank account, so whenever you purchase something for your business, it instantly uploads it to FreshBooks. I love it, and FreshBooks is ridiculously easy to set up. It's made for people who don't like dealing with numbers and their taxes. Right now, FreshBooks is offering a free 30-day unrestricted trial to our listeners. So to claim it, just go to freshbooks.com/letitout and enter "let it out" in the "How did you hear about us" section. That's freshbooks.com/letitout and enter "let it out" in the "How did you hear about us" section. Thank you, FreshBooks. Do you guys know about the brand Third Love? They make bras and underwear designed for the modern woman. When it comes to bra shopping, it's all about finding the right fit for you. And there's only one lingerie brand that offers bras in sizes AA through G and half cup sizes. And of course, that brand is Third Love. They use thousands of real women's measurements to create bras that fit, look, and feel great. To find the bra that you've been waiting for, all you need to do is go to Third Love's website and take their Fit Finder quiz that takes about 60 seconds, and from the comfort of your own home, you can find the bra that's best for you. I hate dressing rooms, and with Third Love, you can try on bras from the comfort of your own home, and returns and exchanges are always free and easy. This year, make the change that will make you change the way you think about bras. Go to thirdlove.com/letitout to find the perfect fitting bra and get 15% off your first purchase. That's thirdlove.com/letitout for 15% off. Thank you, Third Love. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm so glad that I feel like we've been planning this interview for a couple of months now since we first met, and I'm glad we finally did it. We made it happen. I told you this yesterday when I had my amazing session with you, which we can talk about too. I was so struck with you when I met you at the Fullest brunch. You were so magnetic, and I learned so much from you during that lecture, and I still think about it now. And I wrote some notes down here that I wanted to talk about with you. But it's funny because I almost didn't stay at that brunch when you did your talk. I had to leave. I had to get to something, and I was about to leave, and I got a text that where I needed to go was canceled. And so it was very serendipitous that I was even there, and then it became this like watershed moment where I got to learn so much, and your work has been so helpful to me. Anyway, so since then, I've been really excited to have you on the podcast. And so since you're a sexual educator and a doula and a writer and an amazing speaker from when I met you, and a vagina proctor, let's start there. What does that actually mean? How did you get into this work? Tell us everything.
Well, somebody called me a vagina proctor, so it's not what I call myself. Okay. But I think it's just a way to contextualize the work, because what I do is so unusual that when someone hears vagina proctor, it kind of gives them a certain idea of what might happen. At least they know they're going to have hands-on work, and that it'll be structural.
It's
probably.
a good word. Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Catchy.
Yeah.
So I work with women to help them understand their own bodies and their sexuality, and anything that has to do with their pelvic, gynecological, or reproductive health. And I do that in a hands-on, hands-in way. So I track women's nervous systems at the same time as I'm doing the hands-on work.
So how did you learn that? How did you come to this work and decide that you wanted to work with women in a hands-on way?
Well, I was a yoga teacher for a long time, and then I was a Rolfer, which is a kind of structural body work at the same time. And then when I had a baby, my pelvic floor tore, and so I had an injury. And to recover from that injury, I needed hands-on work. And in 3 sessions, I healed a whole bunch of symptoms that I was told required surgery. And so I was able to heal them non-surgically. And then as a result of that, many women started telling me their stories about difficulty orgasming, painful sex, ovarian cysts, endometriosis, abortions, miscarriages, and all of the many, many challenges women have in their pelvises. And so it just was an obvious step for me to take to do the work, because I already did structural in Rolfing, we work in mouths and noses, and it just was obvious to me that the pelvic floor was uncharted territory that people were afraid to touch. And so I was basically just called to it when a lot of people started asking me for help.
Yeah. So for people who aren't familiar with your sessions, like me, who just had one yesterday, what is a session with you like?
It really depends on the person. It depends on what they're coming for and what their goals for the work are. Some people are coming for something really specific, like they wet their pants when they sneeze, or they have never had enjoyable penetration, or they haven't recovered after they had a baby and they're having a hard time figuring out who they are again. So it really depends on what someone's looking for. In an average session, there's a check-in at the beginning so that I can get an idea about how someone's nervous system is, how they're doing, just arriving, because it's very charged to take a hold of your sexuality and come to someone who's not a doctor and also not your lover, and be in a vulnerable space with that person. So there has to be some orientation and settling so that the nervous system is in a good place to receive the work. If the internal work is something that a person's looking for and feels like that's the right direction for them. And then, it's a step-by-step process where I narrate everything that's happening, so there's no surprises, and it doesn't feel clinical like a gynecologist's office. I sit on the table with the person that I'm working with generally, and just have a chance to let the body talk. And sometimes people's legs they can't feel them, and they dissociate, or they look a little bit frozen. And then if I ask them how they're doing, they're not really sure, but then I say, oh, it looks like you're a little frozen and maybe your legs are light. And then they're like, oh yeah, I think that's true. And it's hard for me to be here right now. Or sometimes people have emotional reactions. There's a lot of emotion and trauma stored in the pelvis, and a lot of experiences where people felt helpless or powerless, even if it was a necessary thing like a surgery. And so the body needs a chance to complete those responses and come out of the freeze state, or complete some of the fight or flight responses that happen if we've had surgeries, or we were strapped down, or we've just been in a place where we couldn't defend ourselves for whatever reason.
Yeah. I'm really glad that I was able to experience a session with you, because I want to pick up on something you said, which is that you narrate everything that's happening. And I think that's so important because, like you said, it's so foreign, other than these very intimate experiences in our lives, or a clinical experience, which can also be traumatic. It's uncomfortable to talk about these things for so many people, and to be going into doing something like this, to not know what's going on. That was so comforting to me that you were explaining everything that you were doing and why you were doing it. And what I experienced was not knowing what was going on or how I was feeling. And you mentioned that with just now, of how someone might be tuning out or not being present in their body. Is that something that's common, of people wanting to kind of mentally leave the table or mentally leave the experience and not being fully present there? Is that kind of why you keep the dialogue going throughout?
It's one of the reasons. I don't think people want to leave. I think it's just their habit. Yeah. And we live in a very mental, intellectual culture. And if the body hasn't been a safe place to live, then we have to skillfully come back into it, because just asking someone to concentrate on their body is not enough. And so there needs to be interpersonal connection, and there needs to be some narration. So I don't think anyone's trying to do it. It's their nervous system and physiology detecting a threat, whether or not it's there, and not feeling like the body is a place that has pleasure, or the body is a place that's a safe place to be. Yeah. So like you were mentioning yesterday, like to have a critical relationship with your body, that you're actually outside of your body judging your body rather than living inside of the experience. So a lot of the work, and our pelvises are pretty much the central location of that. So we don't have good sexual education. Most women haven't really looked at their own genitals. Most women are afraid there's something wrong with them, that they smell, that it doesn't look right, that it's not functioning right. And so a lot of the work is answering those kinds of questions and providing education, but hands-on education, so that somebody knows their own anatomy and they don't have to guess where things are. They just know where things are. And in a space that's less charged, even though there might be a lot of charge that enters into the space because of what someone's carrying in. Yeah.
You have such a nurturing energy about you and presence that you feel, I will speak for myself, I felt so calm about how, bizarre this situation could be compared to what a normal day is like. But I weirdly didn't feel weird at all about, someone I met one time's hands being in my vagina, because you have this nurturing energy about you. But that's what I said to you yesterday, of like, I have maybe looked at my vagina in the mirror one time, if that, and you can look at a diagram, and I thought I knew so much about what was happening in my vagina, and I had no clue where things even were, and how much less how things worked or how they could potentially work better. Is that a common thing you see with people, and what do you think would help people be more aware of what's happening in their vagina? What could shift the sexual education that we have now?
Oh, well, that's like the question, like how to save the planet. Basically, that's the whole big question. I mean, part of it is having somatic sex education from when we're young, so that we learn how to talk to each other about how we want to be touched. We learn what feels good to us, not just genitally, not like, oh yeah, now you've got to like go masturbate every day, but like, how do you really befriend your own body, befriend your system, so that you know what actually feels good to you, not what's supposed to feel good, not what other people think feels good, but just actually what is pleasurable for you. And then looking in a mirror, I think looking at each other, that's something that people talk about, experimental sexual play and childhood play, but really as adults, many women who are heterosexual haven't ever seen other vulvas, because you can't really see much from the front. So, and no one's really looking between their legs. Before I did this work, I hadn't seen very many vulvas and seen all the variety. So being able to see how other people look, to see the variety, to be able to see other people's arousal and how that works outside of pornography, because pornography and sex are basically like two separate things. They don't really have much to do with each other. So what is arousal really like? How does female arousal work? And I teach whole courses on this. It's not something you can just summarize, but in my worldview and the future that I want to build for myself and for my child, for my daughter, I would like all women to have somatic sex ed one-on-one with somebody when they get their period, when they have their first sexual experience, when they're pregnant, postpartum, and menopausally, so that you have somebody who's caring, who can reflect back to you what's going on. And it's not all about like the internal work, because I'm not sure, like thinking about my daughter, if when she's 13 or whenever she's going to get her period, if internal work something that she's going to feel is appropriate for her. But the point is to have somebody look at yourself with you, to talk about how pleasure works, to talk about how female anatomy works, to talk about the fact that female arousal takes 45 minutes, and that penetration, for me, when I think about like A in the alphabet, meeting someone, and F being kissing, for me penetration is like R or S. It's so far down the road, whereas most of the women that I see, they go from kissing to penetration, and then they're wondering why their body is not responding, and then they think there's something wrong with them and that they should be better than that, or they should be more orgasmic, but really they haven't even been present in the territory and explored their own eroticism out of this very masculine way of relating, which is very penis and vagina penetration focused. So to have somebody be able to educate you and to be able to do that in an embodied way, not in a like, here's some diagrams, let's like sit across from each other and look at diagrams way. Yeah.
Because I'm someone who really needs to, I can look at all the diagrams, I can even see it on myself, but I need help just being guided to feel where things are, especially something internal, and knowing that I'm thinking of it correctly as the correct part of my body. That was really helpful. And then also what you said to me yesterday about it, vaginas just being like, people's noses. They look different and they are different sized and different shapes. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how that surprised you when you started to see so many more than you would have?
Yeah, I mean, I think in my history, I have a vagina that's very stereotypical, so it's very like what you've seen or what you imagine. So I didn't surprise myself. Mm-hmm. So then it was only when I saw vaginas that were much more ornate, or where you can see the clitoral presentation from just the front, or the coloring is totally different. Some people are more like chocolatey brown and purplish, and some people are really like rosy pink. And some of the inner labia are like very floral and asymmetrical, or I've worked on people who look almost like coral on the inside. And so there's just so many different ways, shapes, forms, dimensions.
Is it common for women to come in and just be like, am I normal? Is this okay?
Yeah, pretty much 100% of the people. Yeah. There's like 2 people who've never asked me that.
Are there... You're the only person that I know that does internal work and have ever heard of. Are there more practitioners like this? How did you decide that this was something other than, your experience with Ralphing and yoga? Like, how did you decide that this was something that you wanted to do and felt comfortable doing?
I feel like that question is kind of like someone asked me if I'm going to write another book, and I was like, well, another book's writing me. Like, I didn't ever be like, I want to be a vagina proctor. It just happened. It just was like people were coming. They need the work. They need the information. I'm an activist. And to me, it's the most powerful point of intervention for like how I want the world to shift. So it wasn't... I have training. I'm a sexological body worker. There's other sexological body workers in the world. Some of them work more with arousal. Some of them work more with the therapeutic side. I don't do erotic massage, which can be a part of sexological body work and is a totally interesting modality. It just doesn't happen to be what I do. I do more mapping, education, scar tissue remediation, and education. And then I train people. So yeah, there's people that are doing it. There's pelvic floor physical therapists, so you can get a doctor's prescription to get pelvic floor physical therapy. But in physical therapy, again, it's a kind of, you're problem solving. I also problem solve here, but I'm not going out. If someone says to me, I've never had an orgasm, my goal is not like, I'm going to get this person to have an orgasm no matter what happens. Like, this will happen today. I don't look at it like that. I look at it as an opportunity to really widen the lens. Most of us think we know what our problems are, and we really have no idea. We're thinking our problem is one thing, and it's something completely different. So I'm really taking the broad view on how to help somebody untie the knot that's the closest to the surface, that's going to get them to the next step of experience or communication. I work a lot with people on communication, on the things that they haven't been able to say, where that communication is coming from. Everyone, I think this trip, everyone's asked me if they're normal, and everybody thinks they're too loose, so everyone thinks they've got like a floppy vagina that's not good enough, not tight enough, not enough, basically. And then everyone also is like really concerned that if they turn their focus on themselves, that somehow they're taking something away from their partner, or that their partner would be losing out if they were to be more articulate about what their pacing is. Because in general, like, I just want to scream from the rooftops to everyone, slow down, like, just slow down. Because so much of what we're seeing about consent and communication would really, if the experience could be protracted and we weren't trying to go from A to X in an hour, we wouldn't be seeing so much miscommunication and so much pain.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point. I think there's clearly, just like you said, it kind of, the book writing you or this coming to you, there's clearly the universe is supporting that with you're here in New York. You just told me people are coming from Virginia and Delaware and all over the country. You have this long waiting list. As soon as I heard that someone was doing this, I was like, sign me up immediately. Women want this work and it's not readily available. Do you see yourself training? Are you already training other women?
Yeah, we're training people, and it's an extensive training, because to do this work you have to be extremely ethical. And ethical isn't just like you're a moral person. It's like you really have to look at your own shame patterns, your own shame matrix, your own preconceptions, everything that's living in your body and how you metabolize those things. So it's an extensive training. We train midwives, chiropractors, acupuncturists, prenatal and postpartum yoga teachers, midwives, I said that already, and doulas. Yeah. So, but I think I was mentioning too, it's actually illegal to do the work because if you touch genitals for money, it's considered sex work. So unless you're a doctor or a physical therapist or an acupuncturist and a chiropractor in some states, then it's illegal. So what I do is called sexological body work. It's legal in the state of California, but it's never been challenged. So basically in other countries, we've taught the work in England, we've taught the work in Australia, because sex work is legal in those countries. It's a less puritanical, moralistic place. And so I'm considered a sex worker. And so we formed a private membership agreement, which is what you do. Like if you want to eat raw dairy is illegal to eat, but you can join a private membership agreement, and then you are able to do that, to have the access to the food that you want to eat. And so we're forming a private membership agreement so that if somebody wants to come and get the work or someone wants to do the work, they join the membership. And that is saying, I take charge of my own health. I am sovereign in my body. I decide who wants to touch me, and I want to enter into this. But I've been doing it for years anyways because it's so needed, and I'm willing to take the risk because I just feel like the gains are much greater.
Yeah. Is it okay to talk about it publicly? Like you can't get in trouble that way?
I'm talking about it.
Knock on wood? Yeah. Okay. Well, back.
Hopefully, I think what's likely to happen if something happens is that physical therapists, people whose scope of practice it is, will start getting their feathers ruffled, and they're the ones that are likely to. But I just feel like you can only work underground for so long, right? And there's such a huge need for it. And what are the alternatives? Like waiting until the FDA approves it, or waiting? I mean, there's pieces of equipment that have clinical studies for years and years that will help women have less tearing during childbirth, and the FDA won't approve them, and the German companies don't even want to go through the FDA because the process is so prohibitive in terms of the U.S. having such a bad reputation for liability in lawsuits. So much. I mean, this is women helping women. Like, I don't know if, like, it's women caring for other women while women care. And this is, I mean, there's nothing older than that. Like, birth went awry when it got taken away from midwives. And so I feel like, I feel fine talking about it. And my experience is that the more that I talk about it, the more it resonates with women, the more they're like, I've had women come to me saying, I've needed this for 10 years, and something inside me knew that somehow, like this, like I didn't know what it would look like, I didn't know the form of the person it would come in, but I knew that at some point this would be available, and I'm just like, they're so ecstatic that they found me, because they're finally able to heal from something that they haven't been able to get help anywhere for.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, so I want to go back to when you were talking about slowing down and the cultural moment that we're in. I think I mentioned to you yesterday that I told everyone in the secret Facebook group for the podcast that you were coming on, and got so many questions, and a lot around this specifically. We talk about feminism on the show, and in terms of feminism and sexuality, what are your thoughts on the intersection of those two, and specifically, this moment we're in the group? Someone asked, I'll read you this and you can kind of take this wherever you want it to go, but Taylor said, can you ask her to talk about the Me Too movement, specifically Aziz Ansari, and I'd love to hear an in-depth conversation with a sex expert. So maybe just share your thoughts on, you started to talk about it a bit with slowing down would be a big helpful thing, but just kind of where we are, and what do you think this movement that we're in means for your work and sexual education in general?
Well, so, we're in the fourth wave of feminism right now, and this wave of feminism is about including our bodies and including our cycles. So the last wave of feminism was about breaking the glass ceiling and achieving everything that men can do and doing it better at the sacrifice of our health. So you see now that lots of women have autoimmune disorders, and lots of women are really falling apart, having children later. Their systems aren't really withstanding it well. And so this wave of feminism is really like, we don't have to be like men. We can be women. And to be women means to pay attention to our blood rights, means to rest when we bleed, means to not override and just be in productive mode all the time, means to be able to ride the cycles. So that's where I think we're at with feminism and sexuality. One thing I really want to emphasize, and I'm talking about a lot with most of my clients, especially the ones who are like under 35, is that we really have a wrong idea about what empowered sexuality looks like. Empowered sexuality doesn't mean that you can just have disconnected sex with lots of people. That's a masculine version of sexuality, an unhealthy masculine version of sexuality, that you can just be indifferent about who you sleep with and sleep with people, not be attached, not have relationships, and move on. Some people might be able to do that, but it takes a really high level of maturity in a way, and you really have to know how your own nervous system works. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to be connected to the person that you're sleeping with. Does that person have to be the person that you're going to marry? No. But there's lots of ways to connect emotion and to connect our hearts and our genitals. And a lot of women, what I see is they're trying to disconnect those two. And so people, like yesterday, someone was saying, well, if we were all just more connected with our pussy, then like we'd be like riding on top of the world, and the world would be this different place. And I think she was kind of saying that if everyone was really in touch with pussy power, that everyone would be like operating at their optimum level. And I don't really think that's true. I think that if all of us were really more connected with our pussies, our genitals, and our womb space, there's a lot of pain there too. Mm-hmm. It's not just like, it's not all pleasure. And what people associate is like, okay, we're dealing with like the very superficial level of discomfort and pain. But what's under that is something completely different. Now, if we've already learned to expand our ability to stay present and be in a very wide range of emotion and feeling states, that's one thing. But if we don't really know how to do that, and we're just going to go straight to the genitals, there's all kinds of stuff that's going to get shaken up that we might not have the capacity to really hold or deal with. So I was just talking to a 16-year-old who basically was so confused about if she had lost her virginity, confused if she had wanted to, confused about communication, and it's just we're so out of sync in terms of our ability to communicate, our ability to communicate through touch, and really what we're all doing here. What are we doing? I'm kind of wondering, what's the goal? Because most people come to me, I think a lot of their goal is just to understand themselves better, but also it seems like this expectation of being a multi-orgasmic paleo goddess, and the path to that is something just like true mindfulness. It's not like rainbows, unicorns, and sparkle dust. Like being multi-orgasmic doesn't mean you're happy all the time. Doesn't mean, it just means you have an access to a really wide range of emotions and sensations.
Do you feel like that's something that the media contributes to a lot? And do you see media shifting based on the moment we're in to portray hopefully better communication and more clear consent and slowing down in the way that they portray sex?
Mm-hmm. I really have no idea because I don't connect to media, so I don't have a television. I don't really watch shows, so I'm not really sure. I don't know if slow sex really sells. I don't really know. I personally have watched slow sex on porn. Well, what's kind of porn? It was part of my education for my school, which was actually watching regular porn, but then also watching slow sex. And it's a very different experience to watch people who really love each other making love than it is to watch people in porn. So that would be great if that could be included in mainstream, but we're kind of addicted to the power dynamic model. We're addicted to the, like, you know, 50 Shades of Grey, throw her against the wall. And there's nothing wrong with that, and that's a whole other conversation. Like, that's speaking to another part of our culture that's really lacking, where women are hyper masculinized, and so they want to be hyper feminized in this, like, total surrender, throw me against the wall, ravage me, because it's such a compensation for women feeling like we've got so much responsibility and we're in control all the time and we're having to make all these choices. And so women are really wanting that other thing in the bedroom. As far as the Me Too movement, I don't know, did you watch the video I made? It's like got like 18,000
yeah, but I'll link to it.
Views.
I'm excited to watch it.
But I mean, my perspective is very nervous system oriented, which is that we, in order to really have a healthy nervous system, which is also what allows us to have full spectrum access to our arousal potential, we have to be able to be in all of the places between the predator and the prey. And for most women, they're hyper-identified with the prey. And for most men, they're hyper-identified, or the expectation at least is that they're identified with the predator. And no one wants to hear those words, because predator is like not a good word. But it's because we live in a culture that's very victim-oriented. We live in a culture that always wants to side with the victim, that wants to demonize anyone who's a perpetrator. And we live in a highly moralistic culture where it's like, well, this is good and that is bad. This is right and that is wrong. Yeah. Now, there's a huge spectrum here, and it's very, like, this should be its own whole podcast, because we get into trouble trying to reduce it and simplify it. Because, of course, somebody who is raped running in a park midday is going to have a really different experience than someone who was on a date with someone that they know that they had slept with a few times, and then had one night where the boundaries got more hazy and felt like they weren't okay with it. It's from and also with childhood sexual abuse and trauma there, or street harassment, like how we deal with those even from a therapeutic standpoint is going to be very different. But what's happening now in the Me Too movement is that it's all just getting piled into the same thing. And so people are talking about how they don't like the guy saying hi beautiful walking by selling flowers at the same time as they're talking about being gang raped. Right. And there are certainly parts of people's healing journeys where using the words victim and survivor are important, because so much of our conditioning is to normalize, well, I guess that was fine. And so many people, what's happening for them right now is they're having all these recollections about ways, places, times in their life when things happened that actually weren't fine, that they just brushed off because they didn't know at the time, or the discussion wasn't happening, or they just normalized it so that they can go on. That's another branch of the nervous system, is tend and befriend, is pull the threat closer. And so women get very confused. Well, why was I still friends with that person? Or why did I still talk to them? Or why did I go back to that situation? Because that's a protective part of our nervous system as well that happens to be estrogen linked. And so it's a more common strategy for women to pull, if you can imagine, you're in your tribal village and you're outside doing stuff, and then a tiger comes in, you're going to pull all your kids and your friends close to you because you're going to be safe in numbers. So there's so many different ways that this impacts how we relate and interact in the world. And I tend to operate from a place that can be unpopular, and languaging it is really important. I would never blame someone for something happening to them. And I do recognize that we don't live in a utopia. There's never going to be a time when there's no predators. We live in the natural world. There will always be predators. But who is a predator and how that is constructed within our lives and with our system is actually pretty relative. So maybe 5% of, this is like totally, I just make the statistic up, but it's like, I think 5% of people are actually like mentally unstable, damaged, and maybe permanently, and like people who are quote unquote bad or malicious or whatever. But the rest of what's happening is just a whole lot of confusion. And people will say, well, you can't just brush it off because it's confusion. I'm not brushing it off. We need to address it. But we need to address it from both sides. The blame is not, blaming everyone is not going to get anyone anywhere. And as you know, and I know, there are a lot of really great men out there, and those men are confused. And again, people don't like to hear that, but it's true. If you're reading about an interaction where a woman freezes and then doesn't say anything, and you're continuing to have an interaction, I know the physiology of freeze. I've lived in the physiology of freeze. I understand that. And we have to construct situations where we have a voice. And can that happen all the time? Maybe not, but we can take drug and alcohol use out of sexual behavior. That's a first step. I mean, I don't think we'd be having half the conversations we'd be having if drugs and alcohol weren't a part of it. And when power is involved, we also have to look at ourselves. We can't just say, oh, well, I'm an actress and I really wanted that part, and so I was willing to do that because I wanted that part. I had a college professor come on to me, and basically my grad school recommendations were on the line. He waited till the day after I graduated and then basically said if I wouldn't be with him that he wouldn't recommend me to the places that I wanted to go. Like, there's all kinds of ways that people can be manipulated and manipulative. But we have to also know our value and our worth, and we also have to stand for that. And we can do that by strengthening our nervous system, by having experiences like what I offer in my work. There's all kinds of ways to get that help through somatic experiencing. Talk therapy is only going to get you so far when you find men inherently dangerous, or every time you get into a sexual situation, your vagina closes, or you can only have painful sex. There's lots of reasons why people have painful sex, but a majority of them are either trauma, so it was painful the first time, then they thought it was always going to be painful, or another kind of trauma where their system perceived danger and that their vagina clenched and the muscles kind of froze shut and they were never able to reestablish safety so that the most intimate and vulnerable part of their body could let go. So I'm interested in somatic sex education for adolescents and young adults so that we can learn this as we're going. We can get out of this model that men always want sex and women don't want it, and so men have to convince us or prod us or poke us to get what they want, and that there's some kind of thing to win. But I have to say that paradigm, and maybe, like I said, because I'm not really connected to media, but that's not operant in my life. I don't meet people that are treating other people that way. I meet mostly people who are trying to do the right thing, trying to understand, and really confused about how to do that, and how to do that in a way where there's still polarity and still sexual chemistry and still passion.
Yeah. Wow, okay. So much. You are so articulate talking about that topic. I learned so much. I want to go back to you a little bit. I went out of order a bit to ask those questions, and I'm glad I did. But with your personal relationship to your body and sex, you, like you said, have this yoga and Ralph and dance background, and you seem to me as someone who's naturally connected and in tune with your physical body through, the work that you do and in your background. But have you always been this way? Have you always felt connected to your body, or has it been an unfolding for you as well?
Well, there's always layers. There's always more deepening and more connection and more body wisdom, for sure. I think I decided really early on, my mom had a lot of plastic surgery, and I decided really early on that I just wanted to accept myself how I was, and that I wanted to break the pattern of stomach hate and evaluating myself constantly through how I look, and I wanted to enjoy more how I felt and what my body could do. And that was a real decision I made when I was about 13, when my mom started getting plastic surgery. But I would say, I've always had a body practice. As I moved through dance to yoga, that was a deepening, because dance was really about how my body looked and the shapes I made, and perfecting lines. And I danced modern as well, but there was more of an outside view of my body. Then with yoga, it was more of an experience, like, holy moly, there's like a lot going on in here. Mm-hmm. And then with somatic experiencing, it was even more that way. Like, rather than mapping, charting, and moving my body, it was really just listening and waiting for the unconscious to reveal itself through my body.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned to you yesterday, I'm kind of the opposite, and we had a lot of questions in this vein too, of feeling really disconnected from my body. I've noticed that and my sexuality, but just my body in general, like I ignore even, I'm obviously aware of this and trying to get better, but ignore different sensations from, hunger, fullness to tune out, or I ignore, when I have to go to the bathroom, if I'm like trying to work and need to get things done. And of course that's okay sometimes, but emotionally I do it a lot as well, with having these emotions and then stuffing them down somewhere, and those get stuck in our bodies. So how do you help women, or when you talk about this sort of thing of where you are with your body and what you teach about sensitivity and sexuality, to be more connected and present and embodied? What was your greatest lesson on that?
I mean, everyone who comes to me is in a body. What we tell ourselves about our body is something else. But anyone who comes to me has much more health than illness because they were able to come in.
Yeah.
So it's really just a constant redirection of listening and a commitment to that, and a real belief that there's something more powerful than our mind that lives inside of our body, and a commitment to living. I mean, that's really the wild nature, but that's going against everything that our culture believes in and trains us into.
You've mentioned painful sex a lot of times, and that's a common thing that I hadn't heard spoken about at all until really recently, and felt very much alone in that. So I would love if you could talk about that a bit, to normalize it, and how people can feel things in sex and not have painful sex, feel better in sex, and specifically talking about desensitivity and how women might be able to feel more, have orgasms, and have that awareness come back to that area.
Yeah, the first step is to befriend that part of the body. So there's lots of gentle ways to do that. Just placing your whole hand over your whole vulva and just feeling that contact and breathing there and connecting. There's so many expectations that are put on the vagina and the vulva in terms of everything, how it looks, how it smells, what it's supposed to do, how many orgasms it's supposed to have. And I think one of the most profound parts of a lot of the sessions that I give is just when I make that contact with someone and they realize, like, there's just someone there, there's not an expectation, it's just plain witnessing. And you can do that for yourself. So as far as the pain is going, to me, it's always, there's lots of different reasons why there can be pain. But in general, like I said, it's because the body's not ready for what's happening. I just cringe when I hear people that have like their dilators and they're like forcing their vagina open, because it's a sphincter. So those muscles can release in an instant. That's why a lot of people say, oh, I can only have good sex if I smoke weed or I drink, because it's a muscle relaxer. So it's like relaxing them and they're letting go of inhibitions, which then allows them to be more available and softer. But they're missing something in terms of a soul journey, in terms of what they could be learning about themselves and their own growth path of what's actually there, what's creating that tension, those obstacles, that barrier. And like I said, a lot of times it's an earlier experience and a feeling that the body's not safe. And so of course we're going to protect the most intimate part of ourselves. So I recommend slowing things down. I recommend getting educated, reading a book like Women's Anatomy of Arousal, just learning, like, female arousal takes 35 to 45 minutes. How many women have had penetration after that? How many women have had an orgasm and then tried penetration? Most people think of orgasm as the end of sex. What if that's the beginning of sex? What if that's where it starts? And to do that, we have to uncondition ourselves, decondition ourselves, because we have to not believe that it's our job to get our partner off. We have to believe that our pleasure is just as important and that our pleasure could actually be feeding the other person's pleasure. We have to undo whatever self-consciousness we have about what we think is wrong with us, or, you know, there's a lot of exposure and vulnerability that goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah. Yeah, you said once, and I wrote this down in my notes because I liked it so much. In another podcast, you say orgasm is like a flower blooming or a pot boiling, and if you're staring at it and trying to make it happen, it won't happen. And I loved that, and I think that's kind of like what you were saying, when the mind wants it but the body doesn't. I think, you know, I'll speak for myself, that's something where I just want my mind and body to match up, and I just want an easy fix. And I think I said to you yesterday, I was just like, how do I just fix this and change it? And I want a formula, and I want a homework, and this is an internal, slow journey. Maybe there's a better word, but anyway, process. Yeah, it's something that takes time, and you have to focus on.
Yeah, or you don't focus on it, like, because what happens is people are really focused on it, right? They're just like, I don't have an orgasm. I don't have orgasms. I'm not sure if I've ever had an orgasm. Like, I have people who say, oh, well, I have this partner and he never finishes. And I think, well, that's fantastic, because then you can just have, like, as much sex as you want. That's incredible. And they're like, no, because the whole time it's just, like, about that thing. And so what it is like, okay, harder and faster friction. Well, that doesn't produce orgasm in general. Like, orgasm requires relaxation. It requires a parasympathetic nervous system response. So doing more and trying harder and focusing on it and hardening and narrowing your focus is just narrowing the experience. Yeah. It's actually relaxing, letting go, trying a different pathway, pausing. I mean, pausing, man. If everyone could just learn to pause, because people think, oh, if I stop, then it's just going to ruin everything. And then he might lose his erection. And then what if I'm not turned on? And is like all this future stuff of like, but if your system just wants to pause and you need to catch up in the moment with all parts of yourself, pause, take a few breaths, back away from each other, cup each other's genitals, look each other in the eye, spoon for a little bit, and then see what happens. And maybe that arousal will dissipate, or maybe there'll be another wave. But the multiple orgasms is really about entering into a state where you're in constant orgasm, because you're in like the valley where your system is just harmonized to that frequency.
Wow, it's funny. I just remembered, I want to tell you this. So yesterday, I think the thing that I took away most was when you said, you were saying that, you were like, you should stop and take a breath if you're feeling overwhelmed, or you just, you know, say that to your partner. And I looked at you and I was like, well, how do I say that? How do I say that in the moment? And you were just like, just look at him and say, can we stop? Can we take a breath? And I did that yesterday, and it was so helpful, and it was so easy. And I think that right there, of just me not knowing how to articulate something and it not be awkward or weird, or I don't know, just not being in my head about it, and saying to another person, and someone who I feel safe with and is educated, to just be like, no, say it like this, and then trying it that way. I think if everyone listening takes that away, of just like pausing with their partner and saying, let's take a breath for a minute, like I think that right there could potentially make a shift. Yeah.
And lots of times you do it lots of times throughout a period of time together. There's, you know, if you're with somebody for a couple of hours, you're going to probably want to pause a couple of times. And once you ask for the pause, you'll notice your partner will start asking for that too, because you're modeling something that both people are experiencing. But there's just so many assumptions being made, and so many, you know, today I was talking with this woman, and she has painful sex, and so she's dating somebody, but she feels like she can't go home with him. And I was just listening to the whole thing, and I'm like, okay, well, first of all, does going home with him immediately mean sex? Because are you sure that's what he's expecting? Like, you're just assuming that that's what happens because you think that's what other people do. But what if you just said, I'd like to come home with you, but penetration's off the table for me? She was like, well, I'm like, why didn't you just say, I'm really interested in you. I'm really interested in exploring sexuality and intimacy with you. And for me, I like to take things really slow. Or in the past, I've experienced some pain, and I know that's something I might need to work with, and I'm wondering if you're open to that. Then you don't have to wonder. Or have the bad experience and then try to repair that and then tell yourself the story that you were rejected because of that, but really it's because you freaked out because you didn't take care of yourself earlier to prepare the person. I mean, everyone's got something that they think they're unlovable for. Everyone's got genital herpes or, you know, a trauma in the past or erectile dysfunction or they're a 45-year-old virgin. I mean, I've heard it all. So there's not a person on earth that thinks there's some reason why they're the one that shouldn't be loved or that they don't deserve it or that they have something that they're hiding that's the thing that's going to make that person not want them, so they're just going to not say it for longer. Yeah. And I'm just like, if you want to create a vulnerable, connected, trustworthy relationship, because people always tell me, oh, well, you're so lucky that you have these relationships where you can say these things. And I'm like, no, I say these things and then I create that relationship.
Yeah.
It's not like I just meet people who already know how to do this. And it's not like I feel like I know how to do it all the time too. But in the moment, I would just rather say, this is what's going on. How is that for you?
Yeah. You said, again, in another podcast that I wrote down that I took away, was you were saying, I can't even find it in my notes, but I know it's in here somewhere, where you said something like, the most skilled lovers that you've been with communicate more. And I think there's a misconception where people think that in sex there isn't communication, there isn't direct communication, and that directness actually makes the experience better. Can you talk about that, or some more advice or lessons or good lines to say during sex, like taking a breath?
Well, one phrase I think is really helpful is just, I'm complete. So at whatever phase you're at, if kissing, you just feel complete with that. Just like, I've had a really great time and I feel complete. And there doesn't have to be an excuse. You don't have to like scream no and like throw your arms up. It's just like, that feels like enough for me right now. Yeah. And I look forward to seeing you again if that's true. Or I'd like to connect tomorrow.
I'm good.
But not, there's this expectation and belief, I think, that once you start something, you can't stop, and the wheels are already turning and the momentum's going, and so you have to just follow that through. And there's so many people that would have like half the amount of sexual partners that they've had, which it doesn't matter how many you have, but it's like, why do that to yourself? Why expose yourself to STDs you don't need to expose yourself to? Why create this system of this situation of high activation if really you're just wanting another thing? So I'm complete, I think, is a really good one. I'm always trying to, of course it helps to know anatomy, of course it helps to, but so many people are caught up on experience and thinking that experiences and variety are the things that are going to make them a good lover or the things that are going to make them desirable, when really it's presence and curiosity that make great lovership. I've been with people who are extraordinarily skilled lovers, but they're not heart connected. So it's lacking something. It's a physical experience and there's pleasure and it might take me into a new place, but it's not feeding my soul, because what I'm really longing for is that together with the heart connection at the same time. And then there's people that are really innocent. And one of my turning points in relationship was a partner that I had that had difficulty maintaining and getting erections sometimes and maintaining them. And we had an amazing lovership because for the first time, a hard dick wasn't the center of attention, wasn't the only thing that mattered. And so there was just so much exploration and curiosity when that wasn't the go-to automatic thing. And so I really recommend women, or all people, because I've found that once I state these things, the people that I'm with are always right on board with it. It's just that they also have never heard of it. But like the last boyfriend that I had, on the third date, he was ready. He said, like, I want to take you to bed. And we hadn't even seen each other naked yet. And I was like, really? That sounds like kind of a lot, like considering we've never even seen each other naked. But he was so shocked at my response because he'd been dating so much that it was like, that was the usual. And then after that, I was like, well, we're adults. So like, we're supposed to have, like the talk. And he like, just looked at me with a blank stare. And later he told me that in all of the dating that he'd done and the women that he'd been with, he'd never once had an STD talk. He'd never once had a talk beforehand about like what expectations were. And so he was just so taken aback. And then the next thing was like, well, what's your criteria then? And I was like, well, I sleep with people that I'm in love with. And then it was like jaw on the floor, because he couldn't believe that someone who works with sexuality and like can talk and communicate openly about it wasn't just like universally available also. That I was like, no, this is my criteria, and so that's where my line is. And then after that, we both became less interested in penetration, and we ended up waiting like 5 or 6 months because we were having amazing sex together that didn't include it. And both of us, I think, kind of realized like, whoa, we have like so much chemistry and so much connection, and we have our whole life to explore this if that's how this is going to go. Why are we going to rush it? Because we're both like, I think we were both worried we were going to like implode. So it was so smart, because by the time we got there, I had no insecurity about what the relationship was about, or if that was why he was with me or not, or all the, things that we think about. It was like, I knew that was something that both of us, the day that I felt my body just let go and like, okay, I think I'm ready for that, he felt it at the exact same moment. And then we were both considering like, well, is this what we want to do right now? And he said, I don't want to right now. I want to wait until we have more time, because we don't have a lot of time right now. And so he ended up being the one that was like holding that line. Yeah. But I had to establish what I was really about. And he had never had a relationship that he'd had a lot of sex, but it had been mostly physical sex. So he hadn't had a lot of sexual connection that was as round as what we were having, with emotional attunement and connection and a different kind of a pacing. Yeah. So once he felt what that was like, he wanted that more too, because it's just more satisfying.
Yeah. I think because people don't talk about sex all the time with their people in their lives that they're even close with, and even with a therapist or someone safe, people just assume that sex looks one specific way that we see in the media or porn or wherever modeled for us. And just to hear other perspectives of it, just hearing that was helpful for me. And I don't know, I think it's so important to talk more about sex. Do you feel that way?
Definitely. And I think it's better, optimal and because people talk about sex, but what they talk about is how many times they're having it or how many orgasms they're having and all the quantitative stuff. But they don't talk about what are they learning from sex, what are they interested in, what does it mean to them, where do you go during sex, what does it give to you that you can't get in other places in your life, what are you working with? Our sexual selves evolve. It's not just like we're just this one thing through our whole lifespan, especially as women. It really parallels all our soul journeys. So I think sexual conversations that have more depth, and then also having the courage to ask for what we want. And our bodies really do know. If we were listening, they do know. And people might say, no, they don't, I can't hear it. But you can. If you redirect it, if I say to you, what would feel good to you right now? Where should I touch you? And you really tuned in, you would say, okay, I think like scratching my scalp would feel really good right now. And then if I did that for a minute or two, then you'd be like, oh, wait, okay, now I want you to like lick my back. And then if I did that a little bit, then you'd be like, okay, now I want you to squeeze my butt. And you'd be like, okay. And there would be a touch trail. There would be an internal trail that your body is yearning for that you could follow, rather than this imposition of, our idea of sex is really tally taking. I do you, I blow you, you go down on me, I come, you come. And that's what people think is like success. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, we've done our jobs, we're good at this. Yeah. It's not like, maybe today you're just going to receive. Yeah. And you're going to maybe want to give, and it's going to be really hard for you to just receive, and you're going to want to do it again, and then you're not going to do it. And then that's it. And that's the interaction. And then the next day, maybe you're going to receive again because you really need to work on receiving in your life. Or maybe you need to learn how to touch for your own pleasure. And so you're going to practice stating how you want to touch the other person, not what you think they want, but what you actually want. And you're going to practice that. So it really is a practice, like musical instruments. You bring your instruments, and if you're going to improvise, which sexuality is, you don't know what that's going to be like. And sometimes the improvisation sucks, and sometimes it's the best thing you've ever heard, but it's a practice, and you show up. And and you don't try to play the same song in the same way every single time and get disappointed when it's not that.
You can't recreate
virtuosity every single time.
Yeah. That game that you started our talk that we met at, which was essentially that, where you had us get with a partner and at the event and that we didn't know, and I think you had for 2 minutes, you set a timer, and we had to touch the other, you were like the person with the longer hair or the taller person. One is the giver, one is the receiver, and you touch the other person how you want to touch them. Am I explaining this correctly? And then from there, the next round, we did it, and then we asked if it was okay, and then we said thank you, and then the next round, you said, whoever's taller, shorter, whatever it was. So I remember I was receiving twice, and I felt so uncomfortable by that. I felt like I was doing something wrong, or like I always like to be, I want to overgive, and I hate that feeling of, even when someone gives me a present and I don't have anything for them, or it was a really good exercise for me. And I think to do that with a partner would be
it's based on The Wheel of Consent by Betty Martin. So there's lots of videos out on that.
Cool.
And it's called the 3-minute game. We did it for 2 minutes because we had a shorter time frame.
Yeah.
But these are somatic practices. So like I would like to see that happening in middle school, learning how to ask for touch. And we're not even talking, everyone goes genitals. We're not talking about that. We're talking about, do you know how someone can touch your arm that feels good to you? Yeah. That's pleasurable, that you like, that makes you lean into it and melt a little bit. And practicing that. And then if someone's touching you in a way that you don't like, that you can say, could you try this or could you try that? And then if you still don't like it, then you just say, I'm complete. Yeah. And can you just sit with me? And sometimes the touch game, people don't want to be touched. They want to just have someone sit side by side to them, or back to back, or, or have a hold of hands close to them. Yeah. But at least we're practicing being in contact. And another thing about that game is really, people freak out because it's like, am I allowed to touch someone and enjoy it that much? And I don't even know this person, but we're all totally touch starved. We live in a culture where we don't get touched enough. So then everything gets piled together. Like what we call sex is actually a need for attachment, a starvation for touch. All of these things, you don't go out on a date for a while, and then you go on a date with someone. You're pleasure deprived because you haven't been devoting yourself to your own pleasure. You may be really lonely because mostly what you do is work and work out. And then here you have masculine energy. Maybe you're starved for healthy masculine energy. And so it all just comes all at once. Yeah. And no wonder it doesn't work out, because all of a sudden you're coming with all of that, and it's not really about what's true in that moment, in that interaction. So we really have to be smart and piece out those other things.
Yeah, it's like what Esther Perel says about a relationship being, not just this partnership. You're asking for friendship, and you're asking for business partnership, and you're asking for all these other things that you're putting on this one relationship to be everything. If we spread out where we're getting touch and connection, not just in sex, it's kind of a similar thing. Yeah. Okay, we have so many more questions from people, and I want to get through as many as we can, so I'll kind of ask these more in a quick fire way, and you can just kind of say, what you think, what your thoughts are on these next few things. So I've tried to break them up a little bit. We talked a bit about relationships, so I think we got through most of these. Let me just look at this. I wanted to just touch on birth a little bit, if that's okay. So your book, which is amazing, is called The Fourth Trimester, and it discusses postpartum time and the transition for women to becoming a mother. Can you talk about that and what you suggest for women going through that period in their lives of becoming a mother?
Yeah, so the first part of the book is written for pregnant women, because most of the time pregnant women know to write birth plans and to decide what they want in terms of where they're birthing and what kind of support they want to have for giving birth. But a lot of times women don't think about a plan for after they give birth. And giving birth only takes 1 day or 2 days or sometimes 3 days, but usually not that long. But the postpartum time lasts at least 6 weeks, and the fourth trimester is 3 months. And then some people say it takes up to 9 months for full physical recovery. But that's also very dependent on each person and each body. My postpartum period was about 6.5 years. The book is really just centering a woman's experience. So we've been conditioned to believe that, you know, a woman has a baby, and then if the baby's healthy, then it's all good. That's the success. The mom and the baby are alive. That's all that matters. And really, as a woman, we're going through a very profound rite of passage and maturation process that is not comfortable. And it looks like a descent for a lot of people. And when we don't have cultural practices in place to support women at that time, then what we see happening is they're getting depressed and isolated and lonely and having longer term health problems because they didn't get what they needed in the immediate postpartum time. So it is a guide for women who support other women, so that instead of giving your friends a stuffed animal, flowers, and a baby onesie, that you can give them my book, or you can contribute to a meal train or a friend train, and you can go visit and actually be with them and help them care for themselves, not care for their baby. And it's really a call to action for our culture to take care of women at this time, because every single woman everywhere who has a baby has the same physiological needs, which are an extended rest period from 30 to 45 days, collagen-rich, mineral-dense food, which varies from culture to culture, but all women need that for their ligaments and bones and tissues to repair. Loving touch, so there's specific bodywork traditions in every culture that are about helping a woman detoxify from all of the hormonal shifts and get her organs back in the right place, and the presence of wise women and contact with nature. So if we start to structure our communities and our culture and our corporate environment so that women actually have the conditions where that can happen, we're going to see that women will be healthier and more radiant in the postpartum time rather than more depleted and having a more difficult time.
I'm so happy that your book exists. Like you said, my go-to gift for all of my friends who have had babies used to be a massage for the mom, but now, and I have someone in my life who is pregnant, and I just ordered them your book with the massage. So that's now my go-to. If anyone wants, I feel like that should be, that's a good one, a massage or something for them, because they get so much baby stuff and they probably have everything that they need once the baby comes, but nobody really thinks about giving them something. So highly recommend this book and your work. And okay, before we wrap, I have some quick fire questions to just kind of say the first thing that comes to your mind on, this is kind of the opposite of everything we talked about, slowing down to wrap up this way. But
okay, hold on. Let me take some upregulating breaths. Do some jumping jacks to put
let's
myself
take a
up
breath.
for this.
This is like, this does not contradict everything we were saying about slowing down, but I just want to answer your questions, okay, people? So, all right. We have so many questions, but let's start here. What is one thing that you wish more people knew about vaginas, if you had to say one thing?
That they are alchemical shapeshifters.
What is one thing that you'd whisper into the ears of all women about orgasms? I can give you a more specific question too, because this is something that someone asked in the group. They said, how to have them during intercourse, how to feel confident enough to let my guard down. And I think it's kind of a question of letting go, what she's saying.
For me, it's all context. Like if somebody's already knows their guard is up, then I'm wondering, why is your guard up? And what do you need so that your guard can come down? And if the answer is, my partner's the best thing on earth, and
she mentioned that
there's nothing possible that the other person can do, it's like looking to themselves about what's interesting. And like, because I feel like people are looking for tips and tricks, like what position, like, okay, we'll just try the reverse cowboy and then lean back a little bit because then you're going to have the G-spot contact. But it's really like, just be in the moment of what feels good at that moment and follow that trail from moment to moment. And the orgasms will happen. They come on their own when you're actually engaged and involved in what's just presenting itself moment by moment. And sometimes that's discomfort, and it's stopping, and it's saying, you know what, I think I'm really mad at you about what you said to me yesterday, and maybe you didn't mean it, but it really hurt my feelings. And then being able to, I call it street cleaning. Like sometimes you got to street clean. There's something that's in the middle of the street. You're not going to be able to keep walking because it's preoccupying the true connection.
Yeah, okay, that might have been my favorite thing.
Or also, just state exactly what's going on. So rather than make a story up about it, what if in that moment that you're feeling like you can't let go, you're able to say that in that moment. Right now, I feel like I'm at that edge where I want to let go, and it's not happening.
Yeah.
And then what happens after you say that?
So good. Yeah, wow. Okay.
What happens if you just name what it is that you think is a problem? Because it's we're all having thoughts, and we're all, so what prohibits a person from bringing that into present moment experience, especially because probably the other person is also perceiving it. So naming it, and then it's all, I think also women are always thinking everything's their problem. It's like, what happens for you to say that and say, what can we do together? Do you have any ideas of how we might shift this? What would feel good to you right now? And if the person's answer is whatever will feel good to you, then you need to ask them further, because that's not a sufficient answer. What will feel good to you? Well, what will feel good to you? Well, what will feel good to you? That's not ownership. Yes, it's great. It's not every person for themselves, go for yours. But at some point we have to reclaim our own desire and pleasure so that we can interface, so that there's some place to go.
Helping each other figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What sounds good to you? What do you want on the buffet? What is your fantasy? And a lot of it has to do also with women really getting out of the judgment place of their partners. Like people have fantasies, and 50% of women have rape fantasies. 1 out of every 2. That's a lot. Yeah. And most of those people are thinking they're fucked up because they're having them.
Yeah.
But obviously they're not, because that many people are having them.
Right.
So it's not really about the content of our fantasies. It's more about other things that are happening in the midst of those fantasies, and how those offer some kind of repair in other aspects of our psyche. So are you courageous enough to ask your partner what their fantasies are? Do you feel the pressure then that you have to act them out if they tell you? Like how willing are you to also share yourself in something a little bit deeper than this hurts? Because eroticism is a lot more than physical connection.
So good. Okay. We got a couple questions about menopause and sex, and I know this is a huge topic, but what are, maybe a few things that you could share around that stage of life and sex?
Well, in general, in menopause, women are really at a stage where they're caring a lot less about pleasing everyone else, and they're caring a lot more about what works for them. So that's why you see a lot of women get divorced during menopause, because they're just like, fuck this whole keep the family together thing. Like, I'm out. I'm going to go move to Sedona and do my own thing. So sexually, it can be an extremely empowered time where women are just really claiming themselves and their right to their own pleasure and their body. And usually they have some experience with what they like and what feels good. So it can be a really powerful and empowering time. Sometimes people have some physical stuff go on, like less lubrication, just because there tends to be more dryness during menopause, or the vaginal tissues can thin a little bit. But in general, like postpartum, we have these cultural scripts like, oh, well, we're old. And so when you're old, because we worship youth in our culture, or postpartum, I'm touched out, or this or that. But we don't have to adopt those as our personal narratives, because it just doesn't have to be true. Being touched out is an excuse. What kind of sex do you want that actually fills you up? What kind of touch do you want so that you feel nourished by this and want to be touched? Not like, what kind of sex do you have to accept? So we have to take initiative about how we want to direct those interactions.
Yeah. Well said. Okay. What is your favorite part about the work that you do?
Oh man, I'm totally hopelessly powerless over my passion for what I do. So there's not really one
you can
thing.
Tell.
I mean, it's been pretty awesome having people read the book and then tell me like they moved in with their mom because they read the book and they realized they were going to need much more help. And before they thought, oh, I don't get along well enough with my mom, but they realized that they would like to repair that relationship. And so they would like to try that. Or I had someone come in the other day who, after 3 sessions, before she came, she'd had yeast infections and BV for like 10 years, like since she was 16. And since we worked together, she hasn't had any yeast infections. And it's not diet related at all. She had already done tons of diets and given up sugar and done all those things. So it was just based on our work together.
Wow.
I've had women who, it's pretty profound, women who thought they would never have sex again because they were so damaged after they had their kids. And then they're like, they come and they get some sessions and they realize, they put it together like, oh, this is why this happened and this is why my uterus is hurting so bad, and I didn't even know that's why I was pushing my husband away, and their marriages probably would have disintegrated because they just couldn't even handle the amount of trauma that was stored in their pelvis. And then they come back and they're like, I'm having pain-free sex, and they're so happy. So, that's super rewarding, but it doesn't require that for me to feel rewarded. It's just the fact that people are getting, my soul call is heal the unspeakable. And so I think whenever you're doing what you're really meant to do, then there's infinite rewards.
Yeah. It's so inspiring, everything that you do. Okay. A few more, these are just kind of silly questions about you. We'll lighten it before we wrap. So, greatest lesson on parenting?
Reality, not ideals.
What are some of your favorite daily routines, like the first few things when you do when you wake up in the morning and the last few things you do in the evening to relax or shut down at the end of the day?
I don't have routines.
I like that. Okay, favorite part about being in New York?
Friends.
Best thing you've eaten in the last week?
Spaghetti squash pasta with sausage, kale, and Parmesan.
Oh, that sounds delicious. Okay, greatest lesson on relationships?
Life is long.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much. I just want to honor you for the work that you do and for doing my podcast, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
And the name of this podcast is Let It Out. So do you feel like I really wrung you dry for all of your wisdom? Is there anything else that you wanted to let out that you wish that I would have asked about that I didn't? Anything that you want to share?
I hope people receive this as a call to action, because that's what it is. It's time, and it's now, and we can do this. So stand up, get the help you need. Don't suffer in silence unnecessarily.
So good. Where can people find you and your work and work with you and your book?
My website is magamama.com. I'm on all the things. Well, not all of them.
We'll link to everything.
Instagram and Facebook really is all I do. My book is on all the places: Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Shambhala is my publisher.
Cool.
And I work in LA, New York, and San Diego is where I'm from.
Cool. Thank you so much. All right, that was my episode with Kimberly Johnson. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. I learned so much from her. I think she's a really interesting person who has so much to share and is doing something really specific and needed. And I'm really glad she did the podcast. And hopefully all of you guys learned something new, and maybe having a session with her is something that you want to try, or checking out her book. And I highly suggest both of those things. All right, now that you've listened all the way to the end, you know what time it is. It's time for the emoji. And I actually have someone here who handpicked the emoji for us. I didn't pick it myself this week. So would you like to tell everyone who the emoji is?
Yeah, I handpicked the pregnant woman. She's got a purple turtleneck. She's got a nice, kind of like a blonde bob. I think we call it a bob.
Yeah, I think so.
And she's like holding her little pregnant belly.
Yeah, she's adorable.
She's super cute.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Kimberly works with, mothers, and she's a mother herself, and we just thought this was a pretty spot-on emoji.
When you have sex, sometimes you get pregnant.
Sometimes you don't.
Sometimes you don't. Not always.
Luckily.
Luckily.
For
some people, yeah.
In this car.
Yeah, right.
Okay, in this family. Okay, goodbye. Thank you for listening. Love you guys. Talk to you next week. Bye. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FreshBooks.com. You know FreshBooks. You love FreshBooks. If you've been listening for a while, you know that I use FreshBooks. I love it. It's the easy-to-use online cloud accounting software. You can personalize the colors, and you can even add your logo. It's great for sending invoices. It really makes you look buttoned up, and it's great for tax season. You can even set up FreshBooks to import expenses directly from your bank account, so whenever you purchase something for your business, it instantly uploads it to FreshBooks. I love it, and FreshBooks is ridiculously easy to set up. It's made for people who don't like dealing with numbers and their taxes. Right now, FreshBooks is offering a free 30-day unrestricted trial to our listeners. So to claim it, just go to freshbooks.com/letitout and enter "let it out" in the "How did you hear about us" section. That's freshbooks.com/letitout and enter "let it out" in the "How did you hear about us" section. Thank you, FreshBooks. Do you guys know about the brand Third Love? They make bras and underwear designed for the modern woman. When it comes to bra shopping, it's all about finding the right fit for you. And there's only one lingerie brand that offers bras in sizes AA through G and half cup sizes. And of course, that brand is Third Love. They use thousands of real women's measurements to create bras that fit, look, and feel great. To find the bra that you've been waiting for, all you need to do is go to Third Love's website and take their Fit Finder quiz that takes about 60 seconds. And from the comfort of your own home, you can find the bra that's best for you. I hate dressing rooms, and with Third Love, you can try on bras from the comfort of your own home, and returns and exchanges are always free and easy. This year, make the change that will make you change the way you think about bras. Go to thirdlove.com/letitout to find the perfect fitting bra and get 15% off your first purchase. That's thirdlove.com/letitout for 15% off. Thank you, Third Love.